The Phillies may not re-sign Ranger Suarez, but there's another high-caliber lefty available on the free agent market. Find out if he could be a fit for the Phillies in free agency on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Locked On Phillies is your number one place for daily, Monday to Friday, Philadelphia Phillies content. You might know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been on air over at 97.5 The Fanatic doing sports talk radio here in Philadelphia for over 6 years now. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for the past 4 seasons, and this is now my 4th year as the host of Locked On Phillies. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. There is a major probability that Ranger Suarez is not back with the Philadelphia Phillies. But there are other pitchers on the market. And one guy that seems like a pretty darn good comp for Ranger Suarez. Could the Phillies look at replacing him with a similar pitcher? We're going to lead off the episode with that. We're also going to discuss why Dave Dombrowski's excuses for this past postseason are officially gone, considering what we've seen in the World Series the past couple of games. And we're going to round out the episode. I told you yesterday, got something special as far as listener interaction. I got a really cool email from a listener who put together a whole spreadsheet of potential Philadelphia Phillies payroll options if they do something that, well, I don't know if they're going to do, but if they take a bold swing at this thing. We'll discuss that later on, but let's start with our next free agent evaluation. Yesterday's episode, we talked about Pete Alonso. So if you want to find out what the chances are that the Phillies could go get one of their most hated rivals and turn him into a saving grace, you can check that out on yesterday's episode. But today, we look at a former Houston Astro. Framber Valdez is going to hit free agency this year, and he is a high-caliber lefty that in some ways reminds you of Ranger Suarez when you watch him throw. Now, the velocity is better for Framber Valdez, but you look at a situation where he's a lefty that can get outs without necessarily having to go to the strikeout. He is good with contact, but he also can punch guys out. He's going to make a lot of money, as is Ranger Suarez, and the Phillies are going to have a need to fill that Ranger Suarez role this next year, potentially, depending on how much you believe in Andrew Painter. So what do you do? Can you go out and sign Framber Valdez? Well, with all free agents throughout the offseason, we're going to break down fit, cost, and the realistic chance that they end up a Philly. So let's start with fit with Framber Valdez. Just looking at the rotation and how good they were with Ranger Suarez here in Philadelphia, I have to say the fit for Framber Valdez is high. The guy is a talented left-handed pitcher. If you think, oh, well, you want to get away from the too many lefties thing, starting pitching was not the issue for the Philadelphia Phillies against the Dodgers. It was the only thing in that series that was consistently elite. And they threw their lefties. I know they opened with Aaron Nola in Game 3 and then threw Ranger technically out of the pen. But Ranger threw more innings in that game. He had 5. Nola had 2 to end up getting them through 7. So you threw your lefty starters, Sanchez, Luzardo, Ranger, and then Sanchez again in Game 4, and they all looked awesome. So adding another lefty to the rotation does not bother me. And there are a lot of folks out there that feel like with Zach Wheeler's uncertainty, with the blood clot stuff that he's dealt with Aaron Nola, not sure what you're going to get out of him. Andrew Painter had a down year in the minors. Some people are uncomfortable with the idea of Ranger Suarez walking. If you believe that spot is a necessary fill spot for the Phillies this offseason, Framber Valdez is the best option as far as fit. Now let's talk cost, because he's going to be expensive. Some of the potential salary comps for a guy like Framber Valdez look to be in the 5 to 6 years and $140 to $170 million range. That's expensive. And the Phillies payroll, we keep talking about it. Dave Dombrowski doesn't seem to have the ability to raise that too much from what it was last year. They are where they are. They don't seem like they want to go deeper into the luxury tax, which is part of the reason I think Ranger will be gone. And the cost being high for Framber Valdez is just reality of the trade. The guy is arguably the best pitcher on the market this offseason. And do I really see the Philadelphia Phillies going out and adding the best pitcher on the market? No, I don't. And that's why when we get to the realistic chance that Framber Valdez becomes a Philly, it's very, very low. Lower than Pete Alonso, lower than even Kyle Tucker. Because he might be similar to Ranger, but he's 32 years old. And he's going to be expensive, probably about in the ballpark of what Ranger Suarez gets, maybe even a little bit more. Ranger's 30. Why would you pay an outside the organization 2 years older player the same amount or more that you could pay your own guy to bring back Ranger Suarez? It just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. I like Framber Valdez as a pitcher, and I think he would be an awesome replacement for Ranger Suarez. But you got to look at why would the Phillies do it. If they're not going to pay Ranger, they're not going to pay Framber Valdez. On top of that, Framber Valdez kind of had that weird thing this year in Houston where he pegged his catcher in the chest with a fastball after giving up a home run. That is just – that was some weird stuff going on in Houston when it comes to questions about character for Framber Valdez. And that's going to be something that teams look at this offseason when evaluating whether or not they want to bring him into their organization. The Phillies have had, when you just look at this past year, a couple cracks in the locker room that seemed so steady under the first 3 years under Rob Thompson. The Nick Castellanos stuff down in Miami, where he complained about being replaced defensively, was sat a game. And there was a little bit of a tension between him and Rob Thompson the rest of the year, it seemed, that perhaps with guys in the locker room. The Bryce Harper yelling at Rob Manfred when he wanted to talk to the team about a salary cap. Not all the players in the locker room were happy that Bryce Harper handled it that way. Max Kepler complaining about his playing time. There were various points in this Phillies season where there was a little bit of unease in the Phillies locker room for the first time under Rob Thompson, but none of it was to the level of intentionally crossing up your catcher and throwing a fastball through his chest. Like, that is dangerous to the point. That would be like not, oh, Nick Castellanos and Rob Thompson disagree. That would be like Nick Castellanos tries to hit Rob Thompson with a baseball bat. Like, that's the level we're talking here. I don't mean to try and overstate it, but that's going to be something that I would shy away from if I was the Philadelphia Phillies. All things equal, Ranger Suarez is a great teammate, a great guy to have around the clubhouse. He fits in this city. He's already been with this team. So if you're going to pay a expensive lefty starting pitcher, it's going to be Ranger Suarez. And I don't think the Phillies are going to pay Ranger Suarez. So by the transitive property, I do not think that the Philadelphia Phillies are going to go out and get Framber Valdez. I imagine that if Ranger Suarez were to sign ahead of Valdez, then there would be some Phillies fans who are looking and saying, hey, go get this guy. You got to replace him. I'm going to tell you now, that's not happening. This is one of those free agents where it would be nice if you were playing fantasy baseball to say, yeah, okay, well, just go out and get this guy. But there are a lot of reasons why this does not work. It has nothing to do with the quality of pitcher that Framber Valdez is, and he would fit really well with this rotation. But he goes in that category of like, sure, he's talented, so he'll fit anywhere. But when you get into the actual nitty-gritty of the situation, it does not seem likely that the Philadelphia Phillies are going to take a swing on a big-time starting pitcher in free agency, especially not a guy 2 years older than the in-house guy that they've already pretty much told you they're not going to pay in Ranger Suarez. So if you're thinking Framber Valdez is an option, I'm telling you, he's not going to be for the Philadelphia Phillies. So we'll look at some starting pitchers that could be a low-cost, high-reward option that maybe the Phillies add, a la Taijuan Walker a couple years ago, even though Walker could still be with the team this next year. He's still under contract for another season. But the big-ticket items for pitchers, not really going to be in the equation for the Philadelphia Phillies this offseason, at least in my estimation, unless they pull something crazy. I will say I didn't expect them to trade for Jesus Luzardo this past offseason because I did not think starting pitching was a major need. Turned out to be a majorly beneficial move by Dave Dombrowski. So you never know. But again, fit high, cost high, realistic chance that Framber Valdez becomes a Philadelphia Philly, very, very low. The realistic chance that Dave Dombrowski can continue to use the excuses he used in his ends of season media availability, also very, very low, considering what's been going on in the World Series. We talk about Dombrowski and his evaluation of the Phillies and the Dodgers as we continue today's episode. Let's talk about Prize Picks first, though, because Prize Picks is the absolute best. You know why? Because you and I make decisions every day. But on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats. And if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. There have been great times where I've used Prize Picks throughout the year, not just baseball season, but now that the NBA is back, put together a couple lineups there. Sixers are playing well. You might want to take a look at them. Some of the young players are putting up big-time stats. Tyrese Maxey, VJ Edgecombe. You can also look at the NFL. It's a great time of year where I think people start to figure out what's going on. You've seen 8 weeks. The trends are clear. Use Prize Picks to take the advantage. Plus, if you're worried about, injuries might pop up this time of year in football. If one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves your lineup from a loss. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Okay, Dave, we got to talk. Because I tried to defend you. I brought it up. And I said it kind of unwillingly. But I admitted it was reality, even if it's loser mentality. If the Dodgers go out in the World Series and they absolutely cook the Toronto Blue Jays and they win in 4 or 5 and they look dominant, Dave Dombrowski's argument that, the Philadelphia Phillies, we were close and maybe we played them as well as anybody's going to play them in this postseason. And they might just be this juggernaut team. And that might not be a reason to blow it all up. I hope you've been watching the World Series. Because that is not what's happening between the Toronto Blue Jays and the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Dodgers, the highest payroll in baseball, who just absolutely rampaged through the National League side of the postseason bracket, are now tied up 2 games apiece with the Toronto Blue Jays, who won 6-2 last night after playing an 18-inning game the night before. Just an insanely impressive win by the Blue Jays. If you want a deeper breakdown of the game, you can check out Locked On Blue Jays and Locked On Dodgers. But my point is not so much to laud the Blue Jays. My point is to say that's a team that does have some star players, but I would have picked the Phillies over the Blue Jays if this matchup had happened and the Phillies had somehow advanced to the World Series. I think the Blue Jays are a quality team and obviously playing amazingly inspired baseball right now. But it's not another super-powered team in the American League that's now taking care of business against the Dodgers. It's a lesser payroll team with less postseason experience taking it to LA. Now, the Dodgers still could and probably will win the World Series. I would still take them if you had to ask me today who wins. tied up at 2 games apiece through 4. But the idea that, well, we just ran into a really good club that Dave Dombrowski floated out there at the end of the season, that doesn't hold water anymore. The Blue Jays are playing the Dodgers more competitively than the Philadelphia Phillies did. And the Blue Jays are a lesser payroll team than both the Dodgers and the Phillies. So there is no more excuse of we just ran into a tough team. You can see, right? And sometimes teams just get hot. I won't take away the you just got to get hot at the right time part of the conversation, because as much as that drives people insane, that's baseball. Get used to it. If you haven't accepted it yet, it's part of it. Does it mean that I say, don't worry about it, Phils? You just didn't get hot. It's mostly luck. It's not your fault. No, they need to be so much better. The stars, the bullpen, the manager, maybe the roster as a whole needs to be better when it comes to postseason opportunities. They're at home because of themselves. And yeah, tip your cap to the Dodgers for putting together a great series in the NLDS. But the Phillies had opportunities, and they didn't cash in on their opportunities. And you can see a team in the Toronto Blue Jays who don't know any better go out there and say, Dodgers schmodgers, we're going to go ahead and take it to them, whether it's 18 innings, 9 innings, or everything in between. And as soon as you think we're dead, we're going to battle back. They have a $255 million payroll. So they're 5th in Major League Baseball. It's not like the Dodgers are the Tampa Bay Rays or the Pittsburgh Pirates or like these low market teams where they never spend money and they're just on this miracle run. So I don't want to overstate this, but the idea that, well, the Dodgers are just this unbeatable superpower, that is now not factual with what the Blue Jays have done in the World Series against them. And half of me is kind of annoyed that the Blue Jays are doing it, because it would be a much easier conversation to say, well, it was just the Dodgers' year again. But that's very clearly not the case. So what happens now? What's the next thought for Dave Dombrowski if you take away the Dodgers were just a good club? We ran into a good team. Tip your cap. It is what it is. Well, next, you have to confront the reality of, what do the Blue Jays have that the Philadelphia Phillies do not? How are they playing the Dodgers so tough? Well, and the Phillies did play them tough. I don't want to act like it wasn't like a tightly contested series, but how are they having more success? And I think a huge part of it is the mentality. And maybe this is it works one time type of thing. Because the Philadelphia Phillies back in 2022 had a group of guys that didn't know any better. Sure, they had some postseason experience with a guy like Kyle Schwarber, who had already won a World Series, and Bryce Harper, who had been in postseasons before, and some other veteran players. But they had this core of like these young, plucky, upstart players, Bryson Stott, Alec Bohm, Matt Vierling. Gene Segura wasn't young, but Gene Segura getting his first postseason opportunity that year with the team, where they didn't know any better. They didn't know they were underdogs. They didn't care. They were just playing baseball. You see that mentality with the Toronto Blue Jays. Where do you not see that mentality? The current versions of Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber, guys in this lineup that have been through the struggles of postseasons past, and it feels like that mentality is gone. Now, you can't just Men in Black wipe your hard drive and say, hey, I forget that we've ever done this before. Let's be the we don't know any better team. Like, that's organic. You can't create that. And I wonder if players with so much postseason experience, like a Harper, Schwarber, or Turner, I wonder if they could ever get back to having that type of mentality. And yesterday we had the conversation about what the Phillies could potentially learn from the Sixers about turning the team over to some younger players. This goes into the same conversation about that mentality. The way you shift the mentality is by a generational shift in the clubhouse. And the Phillies simply don't have those guys yet. Could a combination of Justin Crawford, Andrew Painter, and Aiden Miller, if they're all pretty darn good, shift the mentality in the clubhouse where they start to take over and they have big moments? Absolutely. So I'm not saying it's impossible for the Phillies to get there, but I'm saying right now they are not in the position to do that. And it doesn't mean they can't win, but so much feels like it's up top for the Philadelphia Phillies, like it's in between the ears, not the ability to swing a baseball bat, not the ability to pitch, not power or average or fielding or base running or anything. It's we've got so much pressure and it makes it so much more difficult. And I'm not saying that that's an excuse. I'm saying that's a reality. Watch the Blue Jays. Watch how the Phillies looked. Tell me which team looks looser. Tell me which team looks like they believe they should be there. Tell me which team thinks they can win. Because to me, it's the Blue Jays all day. And that's easy to say considering they've made it to the World Series. But there are no more excuses of it was the Dodgers. That has gone out the window. Even if the Dodgers win the World Series, the Blue Jays have given them a better fight. Coming up next, I got an amazing email from a listener where he broke down a lot of stuff with potential payroll and brings up an intriguing idea for how the Phillies could make not one, but two big splashes in free agency. And I already told you they weren't going to even do that a single time. Okay, let's break it down. We get into a fun listener email as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about FanDuel first, though, because the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. If you've been watching Sixers basketball, you know that they always make late pushes. It's crazy. Could you imagine if last night, when the Sixers were playing down in Washington on the back end of a back-to-back, you bet the Sixers live when they were down 16 heading into the fourth quarter? Think about what the payout would be when they won in overtime. There's always a chance to make money, and FanDuel makes it super easy. The payouts are fast, safe, and secure. The interface is sleek and shows you all the bets that you can make. And plus, they got a great offer going on right now. FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's talk about this listener email. I got to give a big-time shout-out to my guy, Steve W., who sent me an email breaking down a whole bunch of stuff with payroll for the Phillies and two big free agent acquisitions. And Steve, very nice to say he listens every day, and I appreciate that. If you want to be part of our Everydayers Club like Steve, where you're listening to Locked On Phillies or watching Locked On Phillies every day, make sure you're hitting the subscribe button on the YouTube if you're watching. We're available on YouTube, and subscribing is free and easy. Just click the button. You get notifications when new episodes are posted. That way you never miss any of the great content we put out here on Locked On Phillies. If you can't watch, you can listen. We're available wherever you get your podcasts, and I implore you, if you're listening in podcast form, leave a rating and a review. I always love getting feedback from folks who listen every day, or even if you're just listening for the first time. So thank you to Steve for not only giving me some content, but listening. And here's what he did. So he was, I guess he's got a lot of time on his hands, going through the opportunity that the Phillies could sign both Kyle Tucker and Pete Alonso if they let Kyle Schwarber walk, based on some math with the payroll. And now Steve is not including luxury tax, which if the payroll is the same, the luxury tax number should be similar as well. But if you were to move off some contracts like, say, Nick Castellanos or Taijuan Walker, or not re-sign Alvarado, you could be in a situation where not signing Kyle Schwarber allows you to bring in both Pete Alonso and Kyle Tucker. So let's look at some of the guys that Steve has on his roster, assuming that this does indeed happen. Who goes where? He's got Trey Turner playing shortstop. Justin Crawford comes up to be one of your outfielders, left or right, take your pick. Pete Alonso is now your DH with Kyle Schwarber walking. Bryce Harper still at first, Alec Boehm at third. Kyle Tucker plays the other corner outfield spot. JT Realmuto catches. Bryson Stott plays second. And Harrison Bader plays center field. And this is with an assumed yearly value on the contracts of $30 million for Pete Alonso and $48 million for Kyle Tucker. So if you think that Steve's just like projecting $15 million a year for each of these guys, he's not. If you take Kyle Schwarber off the books and Nick Castellanos off the books and Jose Alvarado off the books, and of course you're not going with Kepler and you move on from Taijuan Walker. Now, something I will throw out, like we were just talking about in the first segment about Framber Valdez. If you move on from Taijuan Walker, then the rotation starts to get a little thin, and you would have to address that in free agency. Something else, too, to talk a little bit more about Steve's roster, because he goes through like bench pieces and the rotation and everything. He has Zach Wheeler in the rotation. You'll need to fix that with somebody else if he's not available. The bullpen, he only has 4 guys listed, which obviously you need more than that to roll through what you're doing in a Major League Baseball season. You got to have a lot of guys in the pen. You'd have to fill that up, I guess, with minor league players on very, very minimal deals. The guys he has in the bullpen, Duran, Strahm, Kerkering, Banks. Love Duran, like Strahm, liked Banks this year. We'll see. Don't really love Kerkering right now. I don't feel like you'd have enough in the bullpen if you then stash the backside of that with just minor league arms. So that's where the weak spot of this is. There have to be other concessions on the other part of the roster. So is it like realistic that the Phillies would let Kyle Schwarber walk and bring in 2 other guys? Here's why it's not. Yeah, I love what Steve's thinking. I don't think it's realistic, because when we talk about Kyle Tucker and when we talk about Pete Alonso, the reason that I've already discussed them as free agents is because they are probably 1 and 2 or 2 of the top 3, depending on where you rank Kyle Schwarber, as far as the highest profile, most sought after free agents. And while the Phillies have the money by just doing the math, right? They would have the money to go offer those guys competitive contracts. Here's what happens, right? The Phillies go out and they sign Kyle Tucker to a big time deal. You know what other teams say? Well, we can't let them also sign Alonso. Or maybe we liked Kyle Tucker, but we can make Pete Alonso work. They don't play the same position, but there are plenty of places that could use a first baseman or a DH and could also use an outfielder. So the pivot there could happen for other teams. The chances that the Phillies do not get outbid by another big time spender on one of the top 2 free agents, if they go after both of them, are astronomical. I would say 95+% chance that they're outbid on one of the 2 guys. And that's why, right? Not bringing back Kyle Schwarber to take a shot at other guys is a difficult proposal, because Kyle Schwarber is a guy that the Phillies feel very confident that they can re-sign. These other guys, you're going to have to sell them on Philadelphia. Why would they fit? Why would they move? Why would they like the fan base? Why would they make the team better? All of this argument that you'd have to have with them, not so much argument, but discussion you'd have to have with them and their agent and talk about what their role would be. That doesn't exist with Kyle Schwarber. The negotiations with him are so much more simple. So what's the old saying? A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. A Kyle Schwarber on the Phillies is worth a Kyle Tucker and Pete Alonso as free agents. That's just what it comes down to for me. So I don't mean to pour water on our guy Steve there, our listener Steve's plan that he emailed me. And I really do appreciate all the work he put into doing it. It's an intriguing thought. I like where his head's at. I just don't see realistically that it's going to happen because of all the factors that I just laid out. But here's the thing. Just example to folks out there listening or watching on YouTube. I didn't ask for emails or anything like that. And Steve just went out of his way to do that, which I really appreciate. But if you reach out to me, whether it's Twitter DMs or whether it's on the YouTube comments, or whether it's an email like Steve, like however you want to hit me up. I appreciate any ideas, and I'd love to talk about them throughout the offseason, because with where the Phillies are, no idea is a bad idea this offseason. Some are realistic and some aren't, but you go ahead and throw anything out. This team needs changes, and they're in a very difficult spot to make them. So if there's anything you want me to discuss or you'd like to hear about, or just a question that you have, would love to hear from you here on Locked On Phillies. That's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, we are part of the Locked On Podcast, your team at Podcast Network, your team every day. And I will talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.